In a fiery address that has sent shockwaves through the corridors of power in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso's interim president Captain Ibrahim Traoré delivered a blistering warning to the politicians and officials under his administration. Embezzle even a single dollar of public funds, and face the full, unrelenting fury of the law. No exceptions, no mercy. Speaking at a high-level cabinet meeting convened amid escalating scrutiny over state finances, Traoré declared that violations as minor as $1 in misappropriated resources would trigger investigations leading to punishments dictated strictly by Burkina Faso's penal code, which could range from lengthy prison sentences to, in extreme cases of aggravated corruption tied to national security threats, the death penalty by hanging. The 37-year-old military leader, who seized power in a 2022 coup and has since positioned himself as a Pan-African revolutionary fighting neo-colonial exploitation, did not mince words. "The blood of our people waters the soil of this nation," Traoré reportedly thundered, his voice echoing through the fortified halls of the presidential palace. "Every coin meant for schools, roads, and soldiers on the front lines against jihadist terror is sacred. Steal a dollar, and you steal from the graves of our martyrs. The law will not bend for rank or relation, jail for the thief, or the noose for the traitor who endangers us all." This ultimatum comes at a pivotal moment for Traoré's junta, which extended its transitional rule until 2029 earlier this year, citing ongoing security crises and the need for profound reforms. Burkina Faso, a landlocked West African nation of 23 million, grapples with a perfect storm. A ferocious Islamist insurgency that has displaced nearly 2 million people and claimed thousands of lives since 2015. Economic fragility exacerbated by gold mining nationalizations and a pivot away from French influence toward Russian partnerships, and a legacy of corruption that has long eroded public trust. Traoré's rhetoric taps directly into this vein of frustration, echoing the revolutionary zeal of his idol, Thomas Sankara, the 1980s Marxist leader executed in a 1987 coup and often dubbed Africa's Che Guevara. Traoré's speech is no isolated outburst. It builds on a relentless anti-corruption crusade that has defined his tenure. Since taking office, his administration has referred at least 12 major embezzlement cases to judicial authorities, targeting high-profile figures in ministries and state enterprises. In one notorious 2024 scandal, officials in the Ministry of Humanitarian Action were exposed for siphoning billions of CFA francs, equivalent to tens of millions of dollars, intended for aid to displaced families fleeing jihadist violence. Traoré personally denounced the perpetrators as thugs exploiting the nation's agony, vowing that such betrayals would meet the same end as the enemies they aid. Earlier precedents underscore the severity of his threats. In 2023, former Transport Minister Vincent Debilgu was sentenced to 11 years in prison alongside 4 accomplices for embezzling over 1.12 billion CFA francs, about $1.7 million, in public funds, a case hailed by Traoré's government as a signal to all parasites. More recently, in March 2025, a TikTok viral clip captured Traoré outlining strict punishments for embezzlers, including 2-year minimum sentences for lesser offenses, but with escalations for those whose actions compromised national defense. By July 2025, the regime's efforts had earned Burkina Faso an audacious label in some online circles: a corruption-free zone, complete with bans on offshore accounts and hundreds of officials under arrest. Yet, the $1 threshold Traoré invoked marks a rhetorical escalation, blurring the line between grand larceny and petty graft. Under Burkina Faso's penal code, Article 416 criminalizes the misappropriation of public funds with penalties starting at 5 years imprisonment for amounts under 500,000 CFA francs, roughly $800, scaling up to 20 years or life for sums exceeding 100 million CFA francs, $160,000, or when linked to treason. The death penalty, reinstated in 2022 after a long moratorium, remains on the books for aggravated cases, including corruption that endangers the security of the state, a clause Traoré has wielded broadly against perceived internal threats. Legal experts in Ouagadougou whisper that invoking hanging for something as trivial as a dollar could stretch these provisions to their limits, potentially inviting constitutional challenges or international condemnation from bodies like the African Union. Delving deeper, Traoré's zero-tolerance stance cannot be divorced from Burkina Faso's precarious geopolitical tightrope. The country, once a French colonial outpost, has undergone a dramatic realignment under his rule. expelling French troops in 2023, forging the alliance of Sahel states with Mali and Niger, and welcoming Russian military instructors to bolster defenses against groups like Jamaat Nasr al-Islam wal Muslimin, JNIM, which claimed over 280 attacks in the first half of 2025 alone. Nationalizing foreign gold mines, transferring assets worth billions to state control, has flooded coffers with revenue but also sparked arbitration battles with Western firms. In this context, embezzlement isn't just theft. It's sabotage, undermining the resource sovereignty Traoré champions as essential to funding a 90,000-strong army and free education from nursery to university, a policy rolled out to widespread acclaim earlier this year. Critics, however, see darker undercurrents. Human rights groups like Amnesty International have documented a chilling pattern. Journalists and activists critical of the junta, such as those detained and forcibly conscripted into military service, often face trumped-up corruption charges. In April 2025, the regime thwarted an alleged coup backed by Côte d'Ivoire, leading to a dragnet that ensnared dozens on vague financial misconduct claims. This isn't justice, it's a purge, one exiled Burkinabe analyst told reporters anonymously. Traoré's war on corruption masks a war on dissent, where a misplaced franc becomes a death sentence for political rivals. Public reaction, meanwhile, is a house divided. On the streets of Ouagadougou, youth rallies, fueled by viral clips of Traoré's speeches, chant his name as a Sankara reborn, crediting his reforms with tangible gains. A new tomato processing plant creating jobs, gold reserves for the first time in history, and a declared asset list pegging his personal wealth at a modest $128,566. Social media amplifies this hero worship, with hashtags like #TraoréRevolution trending across Africa, portraying him as a bulwark against elite plunder. Yet in rural hotspots like the north, where jihadist incursions displace families weekly, whispers of fear prevail. Will honest officials now hesitate to allocate funds, paralyzed by the specter of overzealous audits? And what of the low-level clerk who borrows $1 for lunch? Does Traoré's absolutism ensnare the innocent alongside the guilty? As investigations into several unnamed ministers loom, rumors swirl of probes into procurement deals for Russian arms. Burkina Faso stands at a crossroads. Traoré's gambit could cement his legacy as the incorruptible guardian of a sovereign state, or unravel into a cycle of paranoia that hollows out governance from within. For now, the palace gates swing shut on another day of reckoning, leaving the nation, and its leaders, to ponder the weight of every coin in the national till. The trials, it seems, have only just begun. Traoré's address didn't stop at financial misdeeds. He pivoted sharply to a broader indictment of the political class that has long haunted Burkina Faso's halls of power. My government is hell-bent on ending and eradicating these bad politicians, the vultures who have feasted on the nation's flesh, making life unbearable for the common man, he proclaimed, his words laced with the fervor of a soldier-turned-statesman. Drawing on the legacy of entrenched corruption that predates his regime, Traoré painted a vivid picture of a system rotten to its core, where elites siphoned resources meant for the toiling farmer in the Sahel, the displaced mother fleeing terror in the north, or the urban youth scraping by in Ouagadougou's dusty markets. To understand the depth of Traoré's resolve, one must rewind to Burkina Faso's turbulent history of graft, a malaise that festered under decades of post-colonial rule. From the era of Blaise Compaoré, ousted in the 2014 popular uprising after 27 years in power, corruption was systemic, with reports from international watchdogs like Transparency International ranking the country among the world's most corrupt, scoring a dismal 42 out of 100 in 2021. Billions in aid and mining revenues vanished into private pockets, leaving infrastructure crumbling and public services in tatters. The common man bore the brunt. Schools without books, hospitals without medicine, roads riddled with potholes that turned rainy seasons into quagmires of isolation. Traoré, invoking the spirit of Sankara's 1983 revolution, which briefly nationalized key sectors before his assassination, argued that these bad politicians weren't mere thieves but architects of inequality, perpetuating a cycle where the elite thrived while 40% of Burkinabe lived below the poverty line, exacerbated by jihadist violence that has killed over 20,000 since 2015. Under Traoré's junta, this war on the political parasites has taken concrete, aggressive forms. Weekly inspections every Thursday, now a staple of administrative oversight, scrutinize ministers' workloads, procurement deals, and even petty expenditures, ensuring no stone is left unturned in the hunt for malfeasance. Public exams and civil service appointments, once riddled with bribery where qualifications were bought rather than earned, are now under a microscope, with Traoré declaring that meritocracy must replace nepotism to uplift the common man. In a nod to grassroots empowerment, platforms like Faso Arzika have been launched to crowdsource citizen reports on corruption, turning the populace into vigilant watchdogs. High-profile crackdowns illustrate the regime's ruthlessness. The 2024 arrest of humanitarian officials accused of espionage masked as aid diversion, and the ongoing probes into former regime holdovers suspected of embezzling funds from gold mining concessions. Delving deeper, Traoré's rhetoric frames these bad politicians as not just corrupt but as collaborators in a neo-colonial plot, echoing Pan-Africanist critiques of Western influence. He has repeatedly accused predecessors of selling out to French interests, allowing mining giants like Endeavour to extract billions in gold while locals saw scant benefits. Revenues that could have funded irrigation for drought-stricken farms or weapons for volunteer militias battling insurgents. For the common man, this meant unbearable hardships. Skyrocketing food prices amid climate crises, youth unemployment hovering at 70%, and a healthcare system where corruption in drug procurement left clinics empty during malaria outbreaks. Traoré's government, by contrast, has redirected nationalized assets toward populist initiatives, like free education and subsidized agriculture, positioning itself as the eradicator of these ills. Yet, the eradication campaign raises thorny questions about methods and motives. Critics abroad, including the U.S. State Department, highlight a selective focus. While low-level bureaucrats face swift justice, some junta allies allegedly evade scrutiny, blurring the line between anti-corruption and political vendettas. Domestically, supporters hail it as liberation. Viral social media campaigns depict Traoré as the people's captain, with rallies in Bobo Dioulasso chanting against the vampires who bled the nation dry. In rural enclaves, where jihadists exploit governance voids, farmers whisper that eradicating bad politicians could finally bring peace, but only if the purge doesn't devolve into purges that stifle initiative. As Traoré's words reverberate, from ministerial chambers to village squares, the drive to uproot these entrenched figures intensifies. Recent moves, like banning monetized audiences in state institutions, where officials demanded bribes for meetings, signal a cultural shift, but the human cost looms large. Families of the accused plead innocence amid whispers of forced confessions, while economists warn that overzealous enforcement might deter investment in a nation already isolated by ECOWAS sanctions. Traoré, undeterred, calls on every Burkinabe to embody probity, transforming the fight into a national ethos. In the crescendo of his impassioned address, Captain Ibrahim Traoré doubled down on the grim consequences awaiting any politician ensnared in the web of embezzlement, transforming what began as a policy directive into a visceral manifesto for justice. "We will not whisper warnings. We will roar verdicts," Traoré asserted, his gaze sweeping across the assembled officials like a sentinel scanning for traitors. Imprisonment for those who pilfer the people's purse. Years upon years in the cells we are building with the very funds they sought to steal. And for those whose greed rises to treason, whose theft arms our enemies or starves our defenders, the law's ultimate sanction awaits. The hangman's noose, swift and irreversible. This emphatic invocation of incarceration and execution underscores a paradigm shift in Burkina Faso's approach to graft, rooting it in both legal precedent and revolutionary zeal. Delving into the mechanics of this threat, Traoré elaborated on the newly fortified judicial arsenal. The construction of 2 dedicated prisons and 5 specialized courts, announced mere months ago, designed exclusively to process corruption cases with expedited trials and ironclad sentencing. These facilities, he explained, would house offenders in conditions stripped of luxury, a stark contrast to the opulent lifestyles funded by misappropriated billions. For lesser embezzlements, say, diverting funds from a village water project, penalties could span 5 to 15 years, as seen in recent convictions where public officials received 11 and 15-year terms for siphoning state resources. Traoré highlighted these cases as blueprints, noting how one former minister, who once advocated for the death penalty himself, now languishes behind bars, a poetic irony in the regime's narrative of retribution. But Traoré's rhetoric soared to harrowing heights when addressing aggravated corruption. Acts that intertwine financial theft with national peril, such as embezzling military procurement funds amid the jihadist onslaught. Here, he invoked Burkina Faso's penal code provisions for treasonous offenses, where the death penalty, long dormant but symbolically potent under the junta's rule, could be resurrected, hang them if the law demands it, he intoned, evoking historical echoes of Sankara's tribunals that swiftly dealt with betrayers. Legal scholars note that while the 2018 abolition of capital punishment for most crimes lingers in the books, the transitional government's security-focused amendments have blurred lines, allowing for extreme measures in cases where corruption endangers the state's survival. Traoré painted vivid scenarios: a politician skimming from humanitarian aid, indirectly fueling insurgent recruitment through despair, or diverting gold revenues, weakening the economy's bulwark against foreign exploitation. In such instances, he argued, imprisonment alone falls short. Public hangings, broadcast as deterrents, would serve as lessons etched in the national memory, restoring faith in a system where the elite once evaded justice through bribes and connections. Peeling back the layers of this emphasis reveals a multifaceted strategy: psychological warfare against potential offenders, populist theater for the masses, and a geopolitical signal to allies like Russia and detractors in the West. Traoré recounted recent triumphs, such as the uncovering of a massive scandal in the humanitarian ministry, where billions in CFA francs vanished into phantom aid distributions, leading to arrests and vows of no mercy. He contrasted this with the pre-junta era under Compare, where embezzlement was a rite of passage, embezzling public funds with impunity while the common man endured blackouts, famine, and terror. Now, with weekly audits and citizen reporting hotlines, the net tightens daily. Every embezzler will know the cold embrace of chains or the final drop of the rope, Traoré warned, his words amplified across state media and social platforms, where supporters hail him as the scourge of the corrupt. Yet, this deep dive into punitive emphasis unearths tensions beneath the surface. Human rights advocates decry the potential for abuse, arguing that vague treason clauses could weaponize hangings against political foes, echoing global concerns over capital punishment for nonviolent crimes. Economists ponder the chilling effect on bureaucracy. Will officials, fearing a noose for minor errors, paralyze decision-making? And in the villages, where jihadists lurk, locals weigh hope against dread. Imprisonment of the corrupt might free resources for security, but executions could inflame divisions. Traoré, however, remains steadfast, framing these measures as the forge of a reborn nation. As the sun sets on Ouagadougou, his ultimatum lingers, a promise of chains and gallows that could either purify Burkina Faso or cast long shadows over its fragile rebirth. The world watches, breath held, as the trials unfold.